Hi, I'm Phoebe's son, Stuart. Just want to thank you all for coming. It's great to see you all here, albeit for, a delayed memorial, so thanks for being here. And also I want to thank USC Gerontology for supplying us with the venue. Really great, and I think it's really appropriate because my mom spent so many productive, I think fun, maybe some frustrating, wonderful years here. And my understanding is she kind of helped build this place with Jim Barrett. So I'm sure somebody will tell me I'm wrong about that, but oh, good. I was just going like, don't tell me my fantasy is wrong. Particularly, I want to thank Maria Hinke, Linda Broder, Jeanette Brown, and Caroline Cicero for helping out a lot on the logistics on this. Could not have done it without you guys. So, seriously, guided and supported. So I thought I'd start with talking a little about my mom's early history. And Cynthia, when I get this wrong, you can say something about this. Her sister Cynthia is back here. So my mom was born into a pretty interesting family. Her grandfather was Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, Harlan Fiske Stone. Her father, Marshall Stone, was, I guess, a math genius. He was teaching at Harvard at 21, got his PhD at 22. Her mother was an artist, and I bring this up, and her aunt was a musician. I bring this up because I think it shows Phoebe's intellectual excellence and her interest in the arts and music. And to me, these are sort of like pillars of her existence. So, sorry, Wayne. To me, those are really important beginnings for her. She was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She had two older sisters, Dodie, Doris, and Cynthia, like I said, is here. Family did a lot of interesting things, moved to Chicago. Eventually, Phoebe ended up going to Radcliffe, which is where she met my dad. She got married when she was 20, which to me seems like, oh my God, that's young. But if you see some of these pictures of her when she's 13 and she looks like she's 25 and like already knows what she's doing, maybe it wasn't. So she moved to LA, got her master's at 22, had me at 22 later that year, got divorced from my dad, got remarried, got divorced again. Okay, so that's the preamble. Where I think it gets interesting is after that stuff happened. Okay, so my mom was not literally only a single mom, but she was, for intents and purposes, a single mom, but she's also going to night school to further educational things or to learn new technologies. I think she worked at TRW for a while. I was about 8, so fuzzy memory. And she's also singing all the time. So she was a member of the Greg Smith Singers, who gave premieres of things by Igor Stravinsky and other contemporary composers here in LA. She sang early music. She did tours of Europe, at least one tour of Europe. And one of the singers who was on that tour was going to be here today, but she couldn't make it. So she was probably supplied some maybe lascivious details of being on the road with my mom. So, some of my earliest memories were my mom taking me up to some sort of like burned out church up in Malibu, and she's singing Palestrina masses with the singing group, and I'm playing with my war toys, So I'm a guy, right? So the other thing is that in the 60s, my mom was a young woman in her prime, right? She's, in 66, she's 33, which I consider prime now that I'm in my 60s. But so and it was LA, it's a countercultural time. And you're talking about somebody who had an immense curiosity about life, and there's Liebig, and all those things, and was really, she just kind of got into the zeitgeist. So my favorite example of this is she took me to this loft rehearsal on Hollywood Boulevard when real estate was still cheap enough you could have a loft rehearsal on Hollywood Boulevard for this band called the United States of America, which is like this legendary LA psychedelic rock band where people who are like famous bands now are referencing them as being seriously influential. So you know, she takes me to this thing, and I'm this 10-year-old kid or whatever, wandering around watching people doing God knows what while she's doing stuff. So that's something she was doing. Then she takes me to one of the 2 legendary concerts this band did. And you know, that makes me feel cool. Then I have some friends on Facebook who like this stuff. You know, we always reference Facebook now that it's the 2010s or whatever. 20s, Jesus, okay. And so I said, oh, Mom, you know, we were talking about this band. She goes, oh, yeah, you know, we did a concert under a bridge on the LA River with them. And so I say this to my friends, and they're going like, dude, your mom is so much cooler than you. And yeah, you know, my mom was the cool mom. And you know, I'm looking through these photos, and I'm sure, I don't know if you saw the one at the bottom, she's kind of a dish at that age. You know, you're looking through your pictures and go, oh my God, that's my mom. Anyway, so another thing that you may not know about my mom, some of you do, is that she had a really catastrophic back injury in her late 30s, or mid to late 30s. And numerous back surgeries, bedridden, intense pain. I think that's when she first started working here. And, you know, it was really dire. And she ended up persevering, which I thought was remarkable. And, you know, went on to be getting her PhD at 50. The top picture of her in the garland, that's that time. And, you know, really developing her passion and for gerontology. So this is kind of where I'm going to put it off to people who knew her since then. I just kind of wanted to give some groundwork. The dean is not going to speak today. John Pinus is going to speak, and which really makes me happy because they're long-term colleagues. And yeah. Great. So, and I think I house sat in your house one year. I did, and maybe a dog. I don't remember. Anyway, so you know, the other thing is, she loved all you guys. So thank you for being here. And okay, I'm done.
So I want to welcome everybody here. And we're glad all of you could come. Phoebe's friends and colleagues were widespread. They're actually all over the world. But we're happy that everybody could come this afternoon. I have some notes because Stuart said I had to be short in terms of time. So we're here to celebrate the life of our dear friend and colleague, Phoebe Liebig. And you've just heard about her early days. I wasn't there, but I was fortunate to know Phoebe for over 40 years, which looking back seems like it was yesterday. Phoebe was a remarkable, unforgettable person who played an important role in all our lives, our careers, and the building of the field of gerontology. She was a giant in the field. First and foremost, she loved her family dearly. Stuart, Leslie, Aaron, and Anya. But Phoebe had a second family. And the second family is people in the field of gerontology, and particularly the people who worked here. Like the plants in her garden, she supported, nurtured, and sometimes prodded us to be our best and to grow. How she did it is exemplified by a quote from John Quincy Adams. This is a quote: "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, you are a leader." Phoebe was definitely a leader in that respect. I worked closely with Phoebe over all the time that I've been in gerontology. Some of it was to get funding from federal agencies, foundations, to improve long-term care, housing, fall prevention, home modifications, and other people worked with her in terms of their own grants and projects. The ones we worked on were very complex, long-term, involved a lot of partners. And Phoebe's intelligence and policy analysis skills and sense of humor, she had a really good sense of humor, helped make them a success. Phoebe and I edited a book together, Housing Frail Elders from an International Perspective. I considered myself a decent writer until I got the manuscript back that I wrote with all those red marks that most of you are familiar with. Phoebe played an important role in aging organizations, the Gerontological Society of America and ASA, American Society of Aging. Phoebe was always outspoken, but she also knew when to be quiet. In honor of what we thought was her 75th birthday, we threw her a party here at Gero. Some of you might have been at it. It turned out it was only her 74th birthday. Phoebe did not say a word. What I remember most about her during her sabbatical, she went to India and other places, was I walked by her office door and it was open. To my great surprise, I saw on her table a large box full of hundreds of cards with dates on them for her assistant to mail out at the appropriate times. So even while she was away, she was reaching out to wish us happy birthday, happy anniversary, and well-being. That's the kind of person that she was. Upon her retirement, Phoebe gave me a gift. Her notes for teaching Gero 340 and 540, the policy courses. I brought them with me. You can peruse them at your will, but look how long they are, and they're all typed. All typed. Such organization. After her official retirement from USC, I continued my friendship and my family's friendship with Phoebe. We, of course, went to her concerts, and they were great. She was a member of a book club that we belonged to for over 20 years, and she never missed a meeting. She was a thorough reader. And she always brought her pencil notes about the book. You can imagine those notes that she would share. Phoebe was an incredible person, colleague, and a friend. She made a difference in our personal lives, careers, professional organizations, and policies related to aging. Phoebe, in my view, was truly a woman of all seasons, and we all miss her greatly. Thank you.
That was wonderful, John. I only knew Phoebe for 14 years, so I represent a little bit of Gero and a lot of the USC Emeriti Center and the USC Retired Faculty Association, the RFA. Phoebe became a mentor, advisor, personal cheerleader, and dear friend early on. And her strategy, her intelligence, her warmth and humor, and her leadership really brought wonderful initiatives, not only to the Emeriti Center, but also to the Retired Faculty Association, for which she served as the RFA president. She was amazing. She was a true advocate for retired faculty, students, and staff, and played a key leadership role in many important initiatives that she carried through with dedication, caring, and excellence. And I can't say enough about Phoebe's kind, caring spirit. She remembered birthdays, for sure, and anniversaries, and was the go-to person for multitudes of students and faculty. She took her research and involvement seriously and was quick to smile with a wonderful sparkle in her eyes. And I know she kept trying to retire, but they kept calling her back. She was a joy to attend. It was a joy to attend some of her concerts too. What a well-rounded and amazing person. And we do a lot of studying about purpose and passion in retirement. She was the ultimate example, not only of that, but as a wonderful human being. She was a productive academic, dedicated to excellence, but she was the model of an intelligent, kind, caring, and authentic human being, and she will be deeply missed. And I did bring this for you, Stuart. It's a couple of photos here and there of her that I took, and in addition, she won the USC Faculty Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. So all the letters that people wrote about how wonderful she is are right here. Thank you.
That was Jeanette Brown. I guess most of you all already know her. My name is Mark Freeman, and most of you don't know me. Let me put this down. Can you hear me better now? Yeah. Okay. My name is Mark Freeman. Phoebe was a person who knew to give refuge to outsiders. Her classroom at Madison Junior High in the San Fernando Valley was the go-to lunch spot for young intellectual eggheads like me, and would have been for independent girls like Lydia, who you'll hear from later, if she had been at the same middle school. Those who know her mostly as a gerontologist or an early music practitioner, going back to the days of Michael Agnello and the Greg Smith singers, which were mentioned, may not be surprised to learn this about her. We stayed friends, and I learned her full name was Phoebe Goodrich Stone Liebig Whitehead. She dropped the Whitehead after the two divorced, keeping the name of her beloved son Stuart's dad as the last in the queue. The third of her names, I didn't know this would be mentioned, but I'll say it again, marked her descendants from Harlan F. Stone, the 12th Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court in the mid-1940s. And the Goodriches went back, I believe, to an old Massachusetts family. And Phoebe told me they were as dismayed by her choice to waste a Radcliffe education on being a public school teacher as they would have been had she announced an intention to become a streetwalker. When, having been kicked out of several high schools already, and finding that Palisades High was the only school left that had no dress code, i.e. prohibition on long hair, it's the early 60s, I was looking for a way to attend, and having gotten my mother's permission, Phoebe offered me and a friend her converted garage with a baby grand piano as a new address to allow us to go to Palisades. This included meals and the presence of young Stuart, who one day ran into the kitchen to tell her there was a big cat outside. After receiving the equivalent of, "That's nice," he returned a few minutes later, huge gashes spurting from his arm. It turned out to be an escaped ocelot. I lasted I hope it's okay I told that story. I lasted 3/4 of a semester at Pally, getting tossed out either for helping lead a school walkout over a new dress code or for helping people buy LSD. I can't quite remember which it was. This was aside from my job washing large pots and vacuum mopping the floors of Solder Home Bakery in Pacific Palisades. I returned to my mother's house and went to Van Nuys High until a teacher there refused to continue after that semester if I was allowed to remain. It was Commander Whitehead, her suspicious ex. I somehow got my high school diploma, and we continued to stay friends during and long past my almost lost years as a hippie in San Francisco, and then as a conscientious objector and draft counselor during Vietnam, mostly due to her cultured diligence in remembering every birthday and major holiday with at least a card or a small gift. It sounds like many of you were the recipients of that largesse. She flew in for my 50th birthday party at the Musée Mécanique on a windswept stormy night at Land's End in San Francisco. And as I did just a few years ago for a commemoration as their longest singing soprano by her Jouissance ensemble. Through her persistent support, I brought my documentary film, Transgender Tuesdays, to share as art in aging at one of her American Gerontology conferences held in San Francisco. I still treasure a picture painted by her mother, Emmy, that has place of honor in our kitchen, and a lemon geranium on the back porch grown from a planting she carried up from LA. Plus a few photos from a Baja vacation she shared with my sister Debbie and I, as well as one I took of her witchily offering a pomegranate, as if in some ancient rite of passage, a mere decade ago. And you can't see them from that distance, but I have a few copies of these pictures of Phoebe if anybody wants to see them. Phoebe was my oldest friend, but we never outgrow needing a mentor, and I miss her dearly.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Jolene Fassbinder. Gosh, what do you say about someone like Phoebe? There's so much to talk about, so much to share, so many good times. First, I want to start by thanking Phoebe's family, Stuart, Leslie, Anya, Aaron, for sharing her with all of us and providing us the opportunity to celebrate her today. You opened your home, you opened your hearts, and you shared Phoebe with all of us. These are gifts that we really just can't repay. I want to say before I start, Phoebe's friend Rosalie Guilford could not be here today. She really wanted to be here to celebrate her dear friend, so she asked me to share with Phoebe's family how much she loved, respected, and misses her. So I want to share a couple of fun things about Phoebe that I had the chance to have. Phoebe and I would be roommates at conferences. She and I would always share a room, and she knew my number one rule was I needed to have light. I couldn't stand to have the shades pulled. I couldn't stand to have, a dark room, and I would scour the hotel trying to find just the right room that had the right light, and Phoebe was right behind me 100%, always supporting me to get that good room, that perfect room. I had no idea her place was dark. She didn't like bright lights. She kept she kind of kept the light down, but she never said a word. And she was always greeted me with a smile in the morning when it was so hot and the light was shining in. That was our girl. She never said anything. She was very humble and just really cared more about others than she cared about herself. And when I had my rotator cuff surgery, Phoebe was there for me 100%. She was driving ice to my place. I don't know if any of you have had rotator cuff surgery, but you have that big machine and you have to fill it with ice, and that ice cold water rotates throughout your body. Phoebe was there schlepping ice to my house, those 5-pound bags of ice, and just dragging them up my steps, and never said a word. She was right there for me. And she always encouraged me. She encouraged all of her students to do the best that we could. With my job interview after my rotator cuff surgery, she actually drove me to my job interview. She drove from Culver City to Santa Monica. She picked me up. She drove me to Long Beach. She waited for me for my job interview very quietly in the lobby. And when my job interview was done, she drove me back to Santa Monica and then drove back to Culver City. How many faculty, how many people do you know that would actually do that for you? She was one of a kind. So I'll say it's hard to really say goodbye to someone like Phoebe. She was so many things to so many people. She touched our lives personally. She touched our lives professionally. As a student, like I said, she held us to a high standard, but it wasn't a standard that she didn't hold herself to. She held herself to a very high standard, as we all know. As my friend, I always knew that she was there for me. Words really can't express how much Phoebe contributed to my life, to all of our lives. She gave so much and asked for so little in return. I'm really grateful for Phoebe. I really miss her. So today I join all of you in celebrating her. Cheers to Phoebe. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Ely. I'm Lydia Stone Ely. I'm Phoebe's niece, the daughter of Cynthia, Phoebe's older sister. I didn't really know Phoebe until I was 13. We lived overseas, so I didn't really cross paths with her until then, when Mom and I tagged along on a conference trip that she had to Puerto Rico. In the ancient Stone tradition of thrift, we piled into her hotel room and slept on the floor and snuck into the breakfast buffet. But she was really a different species of Stone woman than what I was accustomed to. She had come to LA in the 50s from the East Coast, and she was true blue Californian. She was an early adopter of yoga. What exactly was yoga? We didn't have that in Washington, D.C. She wore, with pizzazz on that trip, striking orange bikini on the beach. And she was vegetarian. What was that? She was so cool. So these are things that matter to a 13-year-old. Later, I learned and appreciated other things about Phoebe. As we've heard already, she got a PhD at age 50. Who does that? She showed resilience and persistence in the face of chronic pain, chronic illness for many years, and was very humble and quiet about that. She won a Fulbright scholarship. I don't think anyone's mentioned that one yet. And somehow, with all this accomplishment and responsibility, she made space, a lot of space in her life for beauty and joy, propagating life, rare plants in her so-called free time, the singing, the life of an artist that requires creativity but also diligence and commitment. And she was a fearless traveler, sleeping on floors for many more years than I ever hoped to do. Every year growing up, Phoebe sent the family a huge Christmas package, and each one of us would also receive a birthday package. Like I think probably everyone here can attest to, at Easter and Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, even Halloween, we would get a greeting card. She also remembered my wedding anniversary, which was awesome because otherwise I would not have. But sending in cards and gifts was not her only love language. She actually showed up in person, fully, when she was needed, for her mother, for her sister, for those of us in the family when tragedy struck, and obviously for many of you here. Over the years, I grew to learn that she brought this thoughtfulness and care to many, many of her lifelong relationships. How did she do it? So much mentoring she did with many of you, how she brought presents for your babies, made time to catch dinner with you when she came through town, how much she adored her grandkids, and she did real time with those kids on a regular and reliable basis, getting on the floor, doing the diapers, doing the, not just the glamorous part of being, not just the glamorous part of being a grandmother, helping raise them, and devoting herself to Stuart and Leslie's well-being at the same time. Later in her life, Phoebe and I found common ground in our professional pursuits. As we all know, she was an expert in housing options for seniors around the world, and I worked in affordable housing for 25 years, so we had a lot to talk about. We were also both vegetarians. We both ended up doing yoga and a lot of time in thrift stores together. We both wore our hair gray, or I like to call it silver, when everyone else was covering it up. And we both continued to wear bikinis long after it was acceptable to do so. Phoebe was an ally. She showed me all the ways we can embrace life, show love, make an impact, and be of service to others. I miss her presence in my life. Long live Phoebe. Thank you.
So it's been written that when a mentor dies, there's a unique kind of loss and heartbreak. We lose the future lessons we will not get to learn from them. We lose the person who saw in us the potential for more than we could see in ourselves. We lose a trusted and honest voice. And that's what I've lost in Phoebe. She was more than a mentor. She was my role model. She was the person who nurtured me as a student, who then embraced me as a colleague, and ultimately became a dear friend and confidant. I initially was introduced to Phoebe in like 1986 or 87. When I first came to USC, I was a young, eager trainee in geriatrics doing a fellowship over at the medical school, and she was part of the USC Geriatric Education Center. One day, the director of the USC Physician Assistant Program, where I was doing my fellowship, came to me and said he just met somebody who I had to meet, and he was really right. He gave me her number, and I called her office, and I shyly introduced myself, which is not typical for me. I'm totally outspoken, and arranged to meet with her, and I was immediately awestruck. Here was someone who was working to educate and train healthcare workers to improve care for older adults, which was exactly what I aspired to do, and I'd never met anybody quite like her. Nothing much came of that meeting, though. Then several years later, I had become a student here at the Andrews Gerontology Center in the first doctoral cohort, and it must have been our second or third year, and I walked into a policy seminar, and there was this new professor. That was the start of our connection some 30 plus years ago that lasted until the last days of her life and continues beyond. I was a working student, was a young baby, And she understood the juggling and challenges of being a mom and a doctoral student and kept telling me everything would be okay, that I would get my PhD, which I eventually did. We both had arrived at aging from a broad liberal arts education at institutions quite unlike USC, and we were always amazed at how this institution functioned, or didn't. We loved to travel and explore new places, especially to developing countries. Her attachment was to India and mine to Africa. We were devoutly liberal in our politics and proud feminists. We shared a love of the arts. We attended dance performances and plays together over the years, and I got to sit and marvel at her singing as part of the Joy Sans early music chorus. About 10 years ago, this led us to undertake exploration from a more academic perspective of the role of creativity in aging, along with her engagement at GSA to bring the arts through performances into the annual meeting, which she was very successful at doing. We both enjoyed growing our own vegetables, and when we would meet up every couple of months at our local coffee hangout in Culver City Tanner's, we would bring each other gifts from our garden, exchanging tomatoes, squash, figs from my tree, blood oranges from hers, pomegranates, and we would laugh at like bringing coals to Newcastle to each other. 8 or 9 years ago, she invited me to join a book group she belonged to, and that was the ultimate intimate conversation that we could have. This not only made me sure we were reading the same books rather than exchanging titles and books as we had done, but provided a date each month when we would meet up, sometimes grab a quick bite, and drive together to the West Side for the monthly meetings, chatting, catching up, and conjecturing on what the discussion and comments would be that evening and who would say what ahead of time, and then analyzing it on our way back. She became aware that she was having word-finding difficulties. We talked about what this might be a harbinger of and options for further evaluation, which never really happened. Over the last year of her life, I was privileged to sit with her every couple of weeks in Stuart and Leslie's yard, a gift for which I am indebted to them forever. I miss her dearly and know that she would be smiling, honored, and just a little bit embarrassed by this gathering of so many whose lives she touched, adored her and miss her, and carrying a part of her with us every day. Thank you.
Wow, this is great. Great to hear from so many people who had such similar experiences as mine with Phoebe. She's just a really special and important person in my life and in the life of all of you as well. My name is Victor Rainier. I teach in the School of Architecture, which is east of here, 3 buildings. And I met Phoebe in 1971, 50 years ago, when I was recruited, I guess, as a student in the training program in architecture and gerontology. I arrived here in the Midwest, from the Midwest, not knowing much about Southern California, and Phoebe was one of the first people that I met, and she was extremely helpful in so many ways, in both orienting me to the place and also giving me a kind of sense of how the university worked. Now, I just want to tell a little story. When I first met her, we were in what was called the research annex. It was prior to this building. In fact, this building was under construction in 1971 through 1973. The research annex is on the other side of the freeway. It's a weird building. I think it's on Grand Avenue and Exposition, and you can't miss it. It's 3 stories in height. It's a white concrete block building that has no windows whatsoever. One of the few around here that's set up that way. It looks like a storage facility, which I think it was, and the Gerontology Center was on the 2nd floor of that building. So, really odd and strange place, but it was really quite wonderful because there were about 30 or 40 of us that were there, and our focus was on one another and on our work. And we had a coffee room that was on the first floor, and people would meet down there and talk and take a break and that sort of thing. It was really a nice little way to get away from the work and the drudgery of living in a building without windows. Anyhow, I walked into the room, poured a cup of coffee, and as I was sitting there, I heard this cry. "How do you like this place? Are you adjusted to it yet?" And I was in this room without anyone else in this room, okay? So this was a voice coming from who knows where. And it kind of freaked me out, I must say. I was a little bit frightened by the whole thing. Anyhow, so I was standing there and I started to walk closer to the center of the room because I wanted to see if there was somebody under a table someplace in the corner or whatever, I don't know. And I came, there was a divan in front of me, so I walked up to the edge of the divan, I looked around, and sure enough, what I heard next was Phoebe's voice saying, "Hey, I'm down here." And I looked down and there she was. And of course, this is at a time when she had all of these problems that were associated with her back. And so this was part of the regimen. She would go into this room, she would lie down, and she would rest. So that was like the first encounter that I had with Phoebe, and I had frequent encounters with her for 50 years. She's a really wonderful person, kind of like a big sister to me. You know, everybody here has a different kind of relationship. She was kind of like my big sister. She would tell me things that I needed to know. She would give me heads up on things that were important, and she also helped me, you know, really helped me. In fact, her job was to help people. That's what she did. Her job was to help people write grant proposals. She helped me write my 1973, successful by the way, AOA proposal. If it wasn't for Phoebe, I don't think I would have had any idea of what to do and what to write. And her main job was to make other people successful. You know? It's kind of amazing. You don't find that many people that are dedicated in that way. And not only did she do it as a staff member, but she did that when she joined the faculty to a whole range of students as well, with the same kind of enthusiasm and interest. So it's not surprising that she waited until she was 50 to get a PhD. She was too busy helping other people, because that's what she was like. Didn't think about herself that much. But anyhow, she decided to do that, and of course it was easy for her to get that degree, and she left, was in Washington for a while, and then decided that she was going to apply for a position that we were offering as an assistant professor. And I was on the committee, and she of course was the best qualified candidate, and it wasn't just my opinion, but everybody else on that committee knew that if we picked Phoebe, we wouldn't make a mistake. She would be fabulous, and of course she was. And for me and for John, she was a particularly good candidate because she was interested in housing, she was interested in healthcare, and she was interested in community services. So John and I really benefited from her professionally in the school. I always turn to Phoebe for, you know, looking at, I know some people are going to laugh at this, but I wanted her to help me think out two of my draft books and one of the monographs that I wrote from the perspective of other people outside of architecture, and she did that miraculously. Not only with generous comments, but I think with comments that were really, that made the manuscript much better as well. So it was really great. I was also the recipient of like every year a birthday card and every Christmas a gift. She selected for me over that 50-year period books on architecture. I have one whole bookcase with Phoebe books in it. And these were books that were not necessarily the kind that I would select, but they were things that Phoebe was interested in and would find interesting to share with me. So, so it was great. I always look forward to it, and I always look forward to talking with her about it as well. I gotta tell you, she's probably the most thoughtful person I have ever met, period. She really was incredibly thoughtful. And for me, she was like the role model of, of thoughtfulness. And so I often think, how would Phoebe deal with this problem from a thoughtful perspective? And of course, I could never equal her level of thoughtfulness. I also had a lot of opportunities to meet with her over lunch and to talk about my life and my career and what I was doing and what she was doing, just like you would with your sister. And it was really great. I mean, if she had wanted to be a therapist, she would have been fabulous as a therapist because she knew how to ask questions. She just didn't agree all the time with what you had to say, but she would make you think about it. And if it was a problem, you walked away with a better understanding of the problem and of potential solutions as well. So anyhow, wonderful person. We've all had great experiences with her. I miss her, I really do. And it's just wonderful for us to have the opportunity to share with one another the ways in which this very special person has helped us all. Thank you.
I see surprised faces, but I came here on purpose to honor Phoebe. I'm not one of her colleagues. I'm part of the extended family. I am the wife of Peter Stone, who was Phoebe's first cousin, the son of Marshall's younger brother, Lawson Stone, and I came here on purpose because I want to honor Phoebe. I'm not her colleague, and actually I belong only to the extended family. I'm not of the Stone blood, but honestly, I have never believed that blood means so much. I know people who are, say, close sisters or brothers or whatever, who are different as night and day, who don't like each other, and who don't even speak to each other. I believe in what Goethe called the elective affinities. That is kindred spirits, people who share the same sensibility, the same values, and the same outreach. And Phoebe was one. I met Phoebe in the mid-90s, and then later, for a variety of circumstances, we became very close because Phoebe went through a very difficult period of her life. And then later I went through also a difficult period. And we communicated very, very often. We wrote to each other. Phoebe, like me, or Cynthia, belong to the generation of people who write and like to write letters and not to send email messages. And so Phoebe wrote to me every time she had something to say, and I did the same. And when I was in dire need, she came to me and really helped me emotionally very much. I had some horribilis years. Peter, my husband, is not here, but I'm here to represent him. And Phoebe remembered, as it was said before, all the birthdays, all the important things. She was the only one who remembered Peter and my anniversary celebration. And she always sent us a small present to buy a good bottle of wine, because Peter and I are wine lovers, and Phoebe, we tried to educate her, but being a vegetarian, I'm not sure we ever succeeded. Phoebe, again, was a very superb person, and we really established a very emotional and close relationship. I want to remember, and I say this here, a very thing which touched my heart. Phoebe visited us the last time in 2018, and she had already realized that something was not right with her. She was too intelligent and too self-conscious and too perceptive. I remember her say at a certain point, we were talking, and she didn't remember something. She said, "Come on, Phoebe, remember." But then, I couldn't communicate with her. I tried to reach her, but obviously I would have done the same. When you feel that you're superb intelligent, you do not want to communicate. But she had the last thought for me, personally. She packed a Christmas gift, which was from her home. She put in a carton box, and she wrote the address, and she left with Stuart to be sent to me personally. And Stuart said to me after she died, it was a beautiful ensemble of statuettes, Christmas present, the Holy Family with the 3 kings. I was really moved. So in the final end, Phoebe loved us, and we loved her. And that's why I'm here.
Hi. Oh, there's more people here than I realized sitting over there. I'm Mimi Faller. I am Phoebe's great niece. I'm Cynthia Ely's granddaughter. I'm Lydia Ely's daughter. I'm Stuart's second cousin or something. Doesn't matter. As Paula said, blood is blood. Today I'm reading a remembrance from my aunt Caroline Ely, who couldn't be here today. So it's what they call a cold read. So we're all reading it for the first time together. So bear with me. When someone like Phoebe passes on, you finally get a full understanding that a person is gone who knew you your entire life, not only had interactions with you, but kept track of you and your actions and knew your history. This idea always overwhelms me. Everyone here knows what an accomplished person Phoebe was and how considerate with her cards and letters for every holiday and birthday. I will share fleeting moments that may communicate additional aspects of her personality and approach to life. I am sorry that I cannot be here today for Stuart to support him as he has supported my family, but hope a few words can help make up for it. I recall an afternoon with Phoebe where she showed me Santa Monica, then a low-rent bohemian district by the sea. She loved the openness and beauty of California. Phoebe charming my friend Larry at a sad, late-in-life occasion, a margarita get-together in memory of my nephew Alexander. Larry was so impressed with her savvy, wit, and honesty, and is sorry to hear of her passing. I was so glad she could be there. Phoebe telling me about the high school class she took with poet Langston Hughes. How much she liked his wit and encouragement, balancing a relaxed gentleness. I didn't know about that. The conversations Phoebe had with my Aunt Joan about psychology, education, and the state of the world. Elevated, intellectual, frank. A connection shared by 2 smart, questing women who, despite all evidence, never lost their idealism and who believed in justice. My sister Lydia continues this inspiring quality. A period where Phoebe was trapped in my mother's very small house in Washington, D.C. during a blizzard. 2 grown adults briefly went back in time and turned back into college girls, bickering, laughing at being stuck together, grateful to be warm and dry. Oh, and cracking dark jokes at a worthy PBS biography of Richard Nixon. Phoebe talking about Stuart's music, proud of his creativity, vision, and accomplishment. Talking about her grandchildren with understanding and protective pride, always referring to Leslie with warmth and admiration. Phoebe loved, educated, supported, and energized many people. Glad to share these moments that passed on her unique gifts. I can only share a few, but there were many more. After all, she knew me my whole life. Thank you.
Good morning. I have the best job at USC. I'm an ex-dean. I was the dean when Phoebe was a faculty member, and we had some difficult times. And she would come in my office, and she'd smile at me and tell me that we'd get through it, and we did. She was also the one responsible for this building and for this school. She wrote the first grant with Jim Barron. It was actually the first training grant funded by the National Institutes of Health in the field of aging. She wrote the grant. It was funded. As a result, the faculty was hired and the school began. So without Phoebe, there'd be no school, there'd be no center. I truly appreciated her support in the difficult times that I went through. She was an amazing, supportive woman. And so anyway, I just wanted to give this brief tribute to this incredible person, Phoebe Liebig. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole Baker. I'm the artistic director of Jouissance Early Music Ensemble. And Phoebe, I'll just say it, was a force of nature. My very first concert with Jouissance was in 1999, and I'd heard Phoebe's name thrown around as an early music lover, etc. And it was my very first concert with Jouissance. I was transitioning it from a mostly instrumental group, well, into whatever. The concert was terrible. And right after the concert, Phoebe walked up to me. She had been in the audience. And she said to me, "I'd like to join the group." And I said, "Oh, Phoebe, I've heard your name for so many years. You were one of the founders of Jouissance, or its predecessor, in 1962. I said, "It's kind of a mess. Are you sure?" And she said, "Oh yes, dearie, I'll be at your next rehearsal." I was shocked. So I wrote Alex Ruggieri of blessed memory, who was the conductor of the Cambridge Singers. And he said, "Oh yes, Phoebe was a member of my group for a long time. Before that, she sang with the Early Music Ensemble, Early Music LA, EMELA, which was conducted by Edward Cancino." He said, "She's great, she reads well, she's a force of nature." And I said, "Okay, we'll see how this goes." Phoebe sang with me, or sang with Jouissance and me, for over 20 years. And her last performance with us was, I think, right before the pandemic shut down. And what was amazing is how great she was. And it's funny, I was thinking, you have to understand, I was sitting there going, people have to know what kind of a musician she was. She was terrific. She was well over 80. She sight read really well, which many, many people can't do. And she sounded great, perfectly in tune. And when she would miss the occasional rehearsals, the altos did not sound as good. She was always a force of nature. She remembered everyone's birthday card, everyone's anniversary. She would send, we all know, she was that way with everybody. Phoebe was, when she faded, I was astonished because at 81, 82, 83, she was stronger than the rest of us. And I think it was kind of a blessing that her fall was quick because she never would have had patience with herself in any other way. A few years ago, we had a Madrigal fundraiser. And we did it in honor of Phoebe because we were just blown away by her legacy, her strength, and her support of our group. And I think it was a great tribute that I think many of you came to that. I don't know if she bludgeoned you into that. She may have. You didn't mess with Phoebe. I remember once I went up to her and told her she was missing a certain passage in music kind of repeatedly. She almost bit my head off. But anyway, the bottom line was that the amount of support and the amount of her talent ran so deep. And deep in the community and deep in the singing community, and deep, obviously, in this community as well. So I miss Phoebe like crazy. She was a force of nature from the minute she joined us till her last day with us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caroline Cicero, and I'm a professor here at the Leonard Davis School, and I was a student as well, and I was a student of Phoebe. I was a first-year PhD student, age 35 years old, with 2 small children in Phoebe's Gero 540 class. A few weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer, and Phoebe came to my house. She gave me this scarf. I was bald. And my mother reminded me yesterday that if it were not for Phoebe, I probably would have quit the program, because to start out a PhD with 2 small children and cancer is not a fun or easy task. So as all of you have received so many benefits and blessings and gifts and well wishes from Phoebe, as did I, as did my husband. She always remembered his birthday, of course, and my kids, as you all know. And recently I took a little class on making shrines. Because of Phoebe, I've been more interested in creativity and aging. And I've been able to teach a class on it. And anyway, I took this class where I made this little shrine. It was in the midst of the pandemic, and they told us to find a little box and find some little things. And so I just knew I could cut out, some of the things that Phoebe had sent me and stick them in here. And I've realized now it's not quite finished, but I have it up in my office. And of course, like for all of you, she's been such a blessing to me, my family, my parents, who remember her well. My dad, of course, recently got the Harlan Stone book and read it page to page at age 86 himself. My dad is a legal scholar and analyst. Anyway, so grateful to be here and hear all of your stories about Phoebe as well. We sure do miss her.
Hi, my name is Valerie Geller. It's wonderful to see all of you here today. Some of you I had the opportunity to meet at Phoebe's 80th birthday party in Redondo, and then again online when that wonderful memorial to Phoebe was organized during the Zoom years of COVID, during those black and terrible days. When I learned from Stuart Liebig that Phoebe had died, it was as though the North Star had fallen from the sky. I loved Phoebe, and she changed my life in 100 ways. I met her in 1969. I was in junior high school, and I looked down, and English, Liebig, and history, Liebig? What was that? I walked in, and my life was never, ever the same. My best friend Patty and I sat there and listened to Phoebe Liebig weave tales of history and allow us an understanding of literature and storytelling that changed our lives. She took Patty and I to see Our Town, the play, when we were 12. And it was the first time either of us had seen anything that didn't have Disney attached to it. And then she took us to a Swedish smorgasbord. And I was so fascinated with the Swedish food that she said, okay, so your project for the class is going to be to do a report on Sweden. Fast forward 30 years later, when I was in Stockholm setting up talk radio for public radio and television for Sveriges Radio in Sweden, I remembered that report. And people in Sweden said, you know so much about Sweden. Well, I had Phoebe as my teacher. I saw Phoebe again in Washington, D.C. It was one of the worst days of my life. I had been elected to the board of directors of the Associated Press Radio, and it was a war. And it was sort of old guard and people who wouldn't change and people who didn't want to move forward. And what they wanted to do was keep the organization alive, not move it forward and serve the people we needed to serve. And I was a lone voice and quite frankly, one of two women. And I called Phoebe. And if you believe in miracles or God or life happening the way it's supposed to, Phoebe was in Washington visiting her sister. And in fact, I think it was around that big snowstorm, you know? And she came over to my hotel, which was, you know, nonprofit, Associated Press. It was, you know, brown rug, brown bedspread, brown walls, and I was in a back room that probably was, you know, $30 a night, right? In the worst part of DC. And she came and she brought flowers. And she sat with me in that dingy room and she helped me design a strategy, a way to approach it, not with personalities, but with end results for each item on that agenda of how we could do it differently to really affect change and freedom of press. And it was an amazing thing. I later went on in my life to run ABC Radio in New York. And then after that, I wrote 5 books, and I work in 42 countries helping develop broadcasting and freedom of speech. And I would not have had this life or the courage to have gone out on my own and taken the risks I took in my world. And I speak for Patty in San Francisco as well. Phoebe gave us the courage and the faith and the belief in ourselves before we even knew what it was to have a life of purpose, a life of service, a life of giving back. And I want to say something about Stuart. She loved you so much and was so proud of you. And Leslie and Anya and Aaron, she talked about you guys all the time. And Anya, you gave her so much joy with each accomplishment, no matter how incremental, it filled her life and it filled her heart. So all of the rest of you, I know intellectually she was a giant. I know accomplishment-wise we're standing in the courtyard of one of the things that Phoebe made. There are people in this world who are makers, and she made things happen. She opened doors for people. She helped everyone, and I'm going to just dare say every person's life in this courtyard right now is better because Phoebe Liebig lived and knew us and cared about us and changed us and listened to us. And she was my North Star. Phoebe, if you're listening now, I will miss you to the end of my days. And I thank you for the contribution you have made to my life, to Los Angeles, to USC, to all the people here, to people in India, truly the world. And with that, I thank you.
Hello, my name's Bill Foley. I'm nephew of Phoebe and the eldest son of her older sister, Doris. I just want to say give one vignette of Phoebe's help to our family. So my grandmother, her mother, Emmy, lived in Menlo Park. I live in Oakland, my wife and I. And in the last 10 or so years of my grandmother's life, Phoebe, I think, took charge of basically helping to manage the big things of my grandmother's sort of last part of life. And given that she was a professor of gerontology and I think a super well organized person, I just want to say she really did a fantastic job. And between my cousin Lydia, who lived in San Francisco and would come down once a month or probably more often, and I and my wife and our young kids would come down probably every month or two. Phoebe, I think, was coming up at least once a month from Los Angeles, spending, a long weekend, and basically made, I think, the last 10 years of my grandmother's life go very, very well. And then she and I were executors of the estate, and we had no problems whatsoever. It was really, I'm not going to say a piece of cake, but it went very smoothly. So again, just listening to all the previous speakers, she really was a woman of excellence, perhaps a force in nature. And as her nephew, I could go on for hours, which you don't want to hear. She really contributed a lot to our lives. So thank you.
Sorry. I'm going to read a couple of things by people who couldn't be here, and I'll try to get through them. This is from Deborah Sheets, who I think is up in Vancouver or somewhere in the Great White North, and I'll read it. Phoebe was my intellectual mother. I loved her integrity, fierceness, and commitment to doing something important. I met Phoebe in 1991 when I entered the doctoral gerontology program at USC. She was a treasured friend of nearly 30 years. When I entered the doctoral program, I was a critical care nurse with absolutely no knowledge of policy or research. Phoebe didn't tolerate fools. Yeah, that's my editorial. She didn't write that part, but we know that's no lie. And her belief in me gave me confidence to learn, grow, and persevere. She's an extraordinary mentor who spent countless hours providing feedback to help me write more clearly, critically, and effectively, and I still hear her voice in my head whenever I am writing. Phoebe helped me to successfully apply for a faculty position in Victoria, BC. She was unfailingly generous in supporting her former students as we developed our careers. How apropos that I ended up in the Garden City. She was a gifted gardener, and I'm grateful we shared time together when she came to visit me. One area we shared a mutual passion was the arts. Phoebe and I worked to increase awareness of the humanities and arts and aging as a source of purpose, learning, and engagement. In the process, we helped launch a Humanities and Arts Aging Journal and organized humanities and arts symposia that infused scholarship into this area over many decades. I've continued this work in the arts by establishing professionally led intergenerational dementia choirs and art-based memory cafe that focuses on poetry, storytelling, drumming, and more. A few things I remember about Phoebe. She loved chocolate and always had a bowl of chocolates in her office. Fresh organic fruits and vegetables from her garden were always shared. She loved the color purple. I'm just going to say, check it out. Margaritas were the way to celebrate. She appreciated the words of poetry, including poetry. Okay. And she wants to close with the words of the poet Mary Oliver in Blackwater Pond. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. We've had to let Phoebe go, but she'll always live in our memories. Okay, sorry. And this is from a student, I believe, Hugo van de Velde in the Netherlands. And he wrote this on the one of the many email internet things out there. And I asked him if I could read this because I thought it was pretty appropriate, and he allowed me to do it. And it's called The Joy of Living into Old Age. Phoebe is a perfect example of successful aging, curious, interested in the world and other people, exploring as much as possible. I'm grateful to have had Phoebe as a teacher and being one of her student assistants. As a foreign student, she welcomed me on her Christmas table. How lovely. And later, my husband and I visited her at her home, at her choir, and we met her again in Amsterdam. Over the years, we stayed in touch and continued to share life experiences by mail every now and then. And of course, I remember her extensive year-end letters. Thank you, Phoebe. You will be an inspiration for me and for us into our very own old age. signed Hugo. Housekeeping. We have a lot of food here, folks. Please eat some or take some home. Anyway, we've done everybody who asked to speak. If anybody else would like to say something, that'd be great. If you don't want to, that's fine too, but eat. That's the most important thing, is eat. Eat and drink. Yeah, we're gonna party or whatever it is, and then, my mom's choir, ensemble, I think. What do you like, ensemble?
I don't know.
Something.
Ensemble.
Band.
Ensemble means slightly smaller than a choir.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay, the something, the vocal entity. They did a bunch of CDs, and I put them. Wayne's going to play some of that stuff because, well, you guys couldn't come today, so next best thing. So you're going to hear my mom's voice buried in the choral entity. And if you guys want to speak, come up and talk to me, and we'll work it out. Thanks. Thank you for being here. Bye.